I'd like to call the Proctor City Council meeting for Monday, July 17th, 2023 to order. Could you please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We'll perform roll call at this time. Councilor Benson,
Present.
Councilor Reuter, Councilor Johnson, present. Councilor DeWall,
Present.
Mayor Ward is also present. Please let the minutes reflect all others in attendance, including Attorney Bray and Administrator Rich. Looking for a motion to approve the City Council meeting minutes from Monday, July 3rd, 2023. Councilor Johnson made the motion. Is there a second? I'll second that. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Oppose? Motion passes. Looking for a motion to approve tonight's agenda. Before that motion is made, I'd like to make one addition. 6F, bike surplus. We'll entertain a motion to approve tonight's agenda with that addition.
So move.
Councilor Benson made the motion. Is there a second? I'll second that. Any further discussion?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. Wondering if it would be appropriate to go into a 7A for follow-up review for negotiations, I guess you'd call it. Or I don't know what you would call it.
Attorney-client privilege?
Attorney-client privilege.
Okay. You heard the addition to a 7A closed session. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Oppose? Motion passes. At this time, we'll take comments and suggestions from the citizens present. The public comment and suggestion period of this meeting is when the City Council offers a time for everyone in attendance or watching from home to address the City Council. Once we move on from public comment and suggestion period of the meeting, members of the public will no longer be allowed to address the council unless the mayor acknowledges you. As a general rule, the council will listen to all comments but will not comment on or respond to any comments made by speakers. The council will not engage in dialogue. However, any council member can ask questions. If you'd like to address City Council during public comment and suggestion period of the meeting, please come forward to the podium or dial 218-628-6289. Before you begin, please state your name and address for the meeting minutes. Comments are limited to 3 minutes. We will have one exception tonight. We do have a guest that is on the agenda. Anyone addressing the City Council will be prohibited from using obscene, profane, or threatening language or boisterous conduct that disrupts the meeting or the security of the public. Is there anyone at this time that is interested in participating in the public comment suggestion period of the meeting? Please come forward or dial 218-628-6289.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and Council. I'm here to publicly thank Proctor for 2 actions that you have done to support the veterans community. My name is John Marshall. I'm listed as a representative of VFW Post 137. I am a past commander, but I here represent all the veterans in the city of Duluth. And I also come as the state commander of the military to Purple Heart. Again, my name is John Marshall. I am a military retiree, 100% disabled veteran with a severity rating. I was wounded in action. I've had cancer twice. I'm having it a 3rd time. I have over 30 medical conditions. I serve my God and my fellow man in the community. Tonight, please turn the mic on. Oh, it's not on. Where's the switch? Is it on cider? Testing.
Is it working? It's working now. I have the deepest gratitude for your city. 2 years ago, the city of Duluth was they made a very unintelligent decision. They were going to charge the veterans community $6,000 to $8,000 to have a Memorial Day parade. And you were willing to embrace us should they not do the right thing. As much as I wanted to come up here, I had a responsibility to try to keep our parade in Duluth since it had been going on since 1871. I don't understand why she wanted to penalize the veterans community. It's not about us. It's about our war dead. Over 1.2 million men and women have died since Lexington and Concord. I just don't understand the rationale. My war lives every day because I live every day. My war won't end until I take my last breath in this life. Memorial Day is very, very important to me. We lost 8 men in our task force. But there's another irony there too, because in 1909, the Minnesota State Legislature created a state statute, 465.5, and in that statute reads that any city of 75,000 people should appropriate from their city treasuries up to $300. If we add inflation to 2023, that would equate to about $11,000. What changed from 1909 to 2020? I don't know. And so, again, I just cannot extend my gratitude to you for your willingness to take us. Now, I also want to thank you as the commander of the state commander of the Military Purple Heart. I understand you guys made a proclamation last year. Unbeknownst to me, I didn't know that that had gone through. Otherwise, I'd have been up here sooner. I was in the first Gulf War. I was with the 41st Infantry Regiment, 3rd Brigade, 2nd Armored Division forward, 4,000 men. 3,000 of us were supposed to die in the first 24 hours, either be killed or wounded. Those were expected and projected and acceptable losses by the U.S. military. I served in 73 Easting, which is on the greatest tank battles. You can see that on the History Channel. I was in 74 Easting, and I was wounded in the Battle of Norfolk. Battle of Norfolk is our nation's second largest tank battle. There were 12 divisions of men, depending on division strength, 86,000 to 260,000 people on that particular battlefield. And so for you guys to become a Purple Heart community means a lot to me personally, because to receive the Purple Heart, you have to be wounded or killed in action. General Washington created a military merit. It was a piece of cloth. It wasn't the medal that you recognize now. That came about in 1932. Because most people that received medals centuries ago were officers and royalty. The common soldier didn't. And Washington knew that they were the key to the success of any military action. And so he created this. And so, again, I am deeply grateful for your kindness that you've extended to the veterans community. We now have the VFW Post 137 up here. They're in a veteran-friendly city, and so I'm not going to waste any more of your time. Again, I want to thank you. With that proclamation, the department gives 2 signs. Welcome to our Purple Heart City. There's no cost for these. If you guys want additional ones, I'll buy them for you. They're only about 20 bucks a pop, but all you need is a couple of bolts and stick it into your city entries. So I want to thank you. Who would I present this to? Jake, since you pushed this through, I'm going to hand this off to you. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Mr. Marshall,
If I can get a picture of you and the mayor, since
and before we proceed, I just wanted, on behalf of the community and the city council, thank you and all the veterans for your service. And we do have the proclamation here I'd like to present to you. You can hang it wherever you feel fit. So.
one more, just because sometimes this is just.
Thank you.
Did we get any phone calls here? Okay. Anyone else present would like to come to the podium? Seeing none, we'll move on. Looking for a motion to approve tonight's consent agenda.
So move.
Counselor Johnson made the motion. Is there a second?
I'll second with removal of 5A.
Counselor DeWall made the motion, pulling 5A from the consent agenda. Any other discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Oppose? Motion passes. That will bring us to 4A, Minnesota Coalition of Small Cities Legislative Update. Mr. Simonson, Senior Lobbyist.
Thank you, Mayor. Is this still on? I think it's on. Thank you for the opportunity, Mayor, councilors, administration. My name is Eric Simonson. I'm a lobbyist that represents the Coalition of Greater Minnesota Cities. I'm here tonight to give you just kind of a brief update in terms of the end result of the legislative session with respect to the priorities set forth by the coalition. Mr. Marshall's a hard act to follow, but I'll do my best to try to give you some information that I think is important. I don't want to take up a ton of your time, but there is a couple things that we want to touch on. Oftentimes after the session is over, we go out and try to visit with a lot of our member cities in settings such as this, just to try to A, give you an update, and B, just offer you an opportunity for any feedback that we can bring back to the coalition as well. The CGMC has been around for about 30 years now. It was created because there was a lack of an organized voice at the legislature representing cities outside the 7-county metro area. And that need exists still today, and perhaps in some days more so than others. Right now we have about 110 member cities, and all of our cities are outside the 7-county metro area. And we focus on some pretty key priority areas. We don't necessarily represent individual cities and their individual projects, but we do have issues that we work on that are more in line with the needs of all of our cities across the state. Primarily those areas are local government aid and property taxes, environmental and energy policy, economic development, transportation, annexation and land use, as well as labor and employment. The legislative agenda is set by our executive board prior to the start of every legislative session. And coming into 2023, our top priority was an increase in local government aid, increase to the state appropriation, as well as a formula change, which I'll touch on here in a minute. We looked at the bonding bill. We spent a fair amount of time working with the legislature on trying to get a bonding bill passed. And oftentimes people ask why we do that. And the primary reason is there's a number of things carried in the bonding bill that are not just specific individual projects, but are more so funding for public facility authority, wastewater infrastructure grants, things like that. But probably more importantly, in my opinion, is to make sure that the end bill is balanced. We want balance between the metro area and greater Minnesota. We now have a legislature that's made up primarily of metro and suburban area legislators, so that balance becomes even more critical. This year we spent a fair amount of time working on lead lines. As cities struggle with how to replace lead lines and how to do the mapping for the lead line inventory, we wanted to make sure that we secured a chunk of state money to do that. And this year we spent a good amount of time trying to get a permanent funding source for small city transportation grants. And of course, we always work on economic development issues, workforce housing, childcare, things of that nature. We came into the session, as you well know, with a DFL majority in both the House and the Senate, as well as the governor's office. Sometimes that makes things easier, sometimes it makes things challenging. All depends on which lens you want to look at it through. For us, representing cities in greater Minnesota, it became a bit of a challenge this session. We had a historic budget surplus. I just want to mention that, I think everybody has heard the news, many, many times about the size of the surplus. Coming into this biennium that we just started, $17.45 billion, but only $5 billion of that was ongoing money. The rest of it was one time. So when they put together their budget, they have to kind of work within the constraints of the money that they have going into the future. So a good chunk of that, over $12 billion, was one-time money for the biennium. This DFL trifecta posed some challenges, as I mentioned. The volume and the speed of policy that came out, unheard of. Normally, in a budget year, legislature comes in, they spend a couple of months kind of ramping things up. They spend a lot of time with the agencies talking about budgets and needs and priorities and et cetera. This year, they spent the first 2 months really focused on major policy issues that were important to their caucus. Now, that's their choice to do that. The problem that it creates is kind of shortening the window of time that they have to talk about the actual budget. So as we get down to the end, fewer and fewer decisions are made in public, and more decisions are made behind closed doors. I want to touch a little bit on LGA because this was really our #1 priority coming into the session. LGA, as you probably know, has been around since the 1970s. It's a way for local governments to try to keep their property taxes in line with what your residents expect and what city councils can absorb. And it's a good program. It's not necessarily a partisan issue, but how it gets funded oftentimes does become a little bit partisan. But coming into this year, so being around since the 1970s, there are formulas in state statute based on city's population. We update the factors to those about once every 10 years. Last was done in 2013. So being 2023, this was the session where we pursued a formula change. And why do we do that, I think, is really what's important. If you look at local government aid and what determines how much money does the city of Proctor get, there's a couple of factors. One, the formula kind of measures roughly what your unmet need is. And the unmet need is defined in law as basically a formula that says how much the city of Proctor's side, how big your general fund budget should be based on the factors that go in. And those factors are kind of the age of your housing stock, how much commercial, industrial, utility property that you have, what your peak population decline is, so on. And it sets a number, okay? That number becomes your unmet need. That's basically the top shelf. Somewhere below that is the levy that you actually do pass on an annual basis. So that amount in the middle is kind of the gap, and that gap is meant to be filled by local government aid. Now, we will never meet that gap for most cities because in order to fully fund local government aid across the state, it would cost about $1.5 billion. We're appropriating state funds to this program somewhere in the neighborhood now of about $640 million annually. So you still have some growth there. But why it's important to update this formula is to kind of lengthen this runway, if you will, that the city will be on local government aid. So this year we updated the formula factors, which benefits you by increasing your unmet need. And we also were able to secure $80 million in new money going onto the formula, which helps kind of bring up that appropriation to the city. So there's some papers that were that should be handed around, and there's a graph in there that'll show you kind of way on the left where we started with the CGMC in our initial ask. You know, we asked for $150 million coming in. We thought, hey, $18 billion surplus, $150 million doesn't seem like a lot. But by the time all the dust settled at the end of the session, we got $80 million in new money, which is nothing to sneeze at either, as well as the formula adjustment, which I think benefits your city. But I do want to just stress the point that it's not just what you see in 2024 that's important. It's the fact that we've increased that unmet need, so we've lengthened the runway in which the city will be receiving LGA. We had some disagreements with the governor on local government aid. The governor puts forward a budget proposal before the legislature does theirs. And his proposal proposed an increase of just $30 million for LGA, and that's not enough money. We called, this coalition called him out pretty loudly and pretty publicly. He responded with an increase of 10, bringing it up to $40 million. So we kind of focused our efforts from that point forward, working on the legislators themselves. And I want to give credit where credit is due. Representative Dave Lislegard, who represents a portion of the Iron Range, was incredibly helpful on this particular issue. He served as the chairman in the property tax division this year. He was on the final conference committee for the tax bill, and he was really kind of our champion in our corner all the way along, and we appreciate the work that he did. In addition to the LGA result, I mentioned a little bit about bonding, and I just want to talk about kind of what happened here. There hadn't been a bonding bill since 2020. So as we came into session, there was some talk amongst the legislature that they wanted to try to bring back the bill that didn't pass in 2022, which frankly was actually a pretty good bill. It was pretty well balanced. It kind of reflects the amount of projects that are out there in the queue. And they requires a 60% majority in order to pass these bills. So they have to have members from the other party to do that. Passed with no problem in the House. We had good bipartisan support there. And it failed on a party line vote in the Senate. And the reason why that it failed is that the Senate GOP really wanted some additional negotiating power, if you will, and there was a couple of things that they wanted to see, not the least of which was more monies for nursing homes and some meaningful tax relief. So for the next 2 months, we spent trying to work with them to try to find a path forward. But why that was important is is a critical thing to think about. With the amount of cash that was available, given the size of the surplus, the DFL kind of threatened to, if the GOP wasn't going to help them pass a general obligation bonding bill, they were going to pass an all-cash bill. Okay, that they could do with the majorities that they have. The problem with that, if you actually looked at that all-cash bill, it was about 85 to 90% metro area projects, which didn't leave a lot of projects sprinkled around the rest of greater Minnesota. So we felt that that was a bad idea and kind of pushed back against that. And like I said, we spent the better part of 2 months trying to find a path forward. And eventually we did. The DFL did eventually agree in about the middle of May to an additional $300 million in nursing home aid, which I think frankly is good for everybody. And the GOP agreed to vote for a traditional bonding bill and a cash infrastructure bill, totaling about $2.6 billion worth of projects across the state. That is huge. It doesn't necessarily reflect all the projects that are out there kind of waiting, but we did very well in terms of greater Minnesota projects in that final bill that was passed. I want to talk just briefly about lead pipes. I'm sure that you have some lead pipes in your city that needs to be addressed. We know that the federal government has mandated all cities to kind of map out where those pipes are by October of 2024. So we felt it was important to secure some monies out of that state budget to set aside for lead pipe abatement and mapping. We partnered with some labor organizations, LIUNA in particular, and were able to finally see about a $240 million bill passed that will be used for cities and other government agencies to identify and do the mapping that's required by the end of next year, as well as start kind of the process of replacement of those lines. What's unique about this, and processes will be coming out from the Department of Health and MMB, but what's unique about this is that the public money can actually be used on the private side of that infrastructure. So that's good, because we felt that if it was only to be used for the public side, we were going to have a real problem with the private side of trying to resolve this problem. So that was good. And lastly, on environment, you know, we don't necessarily spend a lot of time talking about proactive proposals. We spend way more time kind of defending greater Minnesota against what we think are harmful proposals. It is really difficult right now for cities and developers in our cities to actually do work and follow the permitting process, and making that any harder is going to become increasingly challenging. So we spend a lot of time kind of playing defense against what we think is really bad policy. So we work to narrow the scope of some of these permit changes. You know, if they want to do permit changes that really restrict development in the metro area, I guess that's your business. But we don't want to see it in greater Minnesota. We certainly appreciate and support the idea of protecting the environment, but we also have to be reasonable and think about how some of these things are done. And frankly, with with a DFL majority that's made up mostly of metro and suburban members, there's not a lot of consideration given to how things affect how we do business, how you do business here in Proctor, or how they do business in Thief River Falls or Laverne, Minnesota. It's just not necessarily part of the thought process, which makes the fact that we are there that much more important. 2024 session will be a traditional year for a bonding bill, and even though they just passed this huge bonding bill a few months ago, the governor has indicated he'd like to see another one. The Speaker of the House has indicated they'd like to see another one. I don't know if you have anything going into the queue for 2024 or not, but if you do, I would say that there's a good chance that there'll be another bonding bill in 2024. I don't know that it'll be as large, but I would anticipate that there will be a bill. We think that the legislature will probably consider some constitutional amendments for the ballot in November of 2024. I have no idea what they will be, but oftentimes when they control both the House and the Senate and the governor's office, that's what they do. It remains to be seen whether there'll be any more surplus spending or not. We thought coming into 2023, as we were kind of preparing for the session, we thought that there was no way that they would be able to spend the entire surplus. It just wasn't even feasible. But spend it they did, and then some more on top of that. But we don't know what the budget will look like coming into 24. You know, we'll have a forecast come out here in November. There'll be another one in February that'll kind of give a roadmap of what the economics look like going forward. I can tell you through the end of June of this year, the last 3 months of the fiscal year, all of our revenues were still above expectations. So the state is still cruising along on a pretty good clip, but I think a lot of people are starting to believe that that probably won't last forever. We anticipate they'll be fixing a lot of things from the 2023 session. You just can't do that much policy that fast without making some mistakes. We've already seen some mistakes identified in the tax bill that was passed, so they're gonna have to spend some time on that. And it's traditionally, in addition to a bonding year, it's a policy year. We don't have to pass a state budget in 2024, but they generally save that year for policy discussions and big policy discussions. So we anticipate there will be more and more conversation around environmental permitting and such. All of that fun will start on February 12th, 2024. In addition to all the things I just mentioned, it is of course an election year for the entire House of Representatives. That usually brings in an interesting dynamic. But nonetheless, we are, I think, well positioned in terms of what happened in 2023 with respect to the CGMC priorities. We felt pretty good about the way things were passed. With the transportation dollars, again, we finally have a dedicated revenue source for smaller cities. We've never had a dedicated source. Every time money has been appropriated for that program, it's been kind of scratching and clawing to try to get an appropriation every year. But now it looks like with what has been set aside, that by 2025 or so, that fund should receive about $25 million a year, which will go a long way for smaller cities. The last thing I wanted to mention, and there's a handout about this in your packet, is about the public safety aid. The legislature passed a bill that appropriated $300 million for all counties, cities, tribal governments, one-time money, one-time appropriation that can be used for anything, well, I should say almost anything relative to public safety. And there's a handout there that kind of shows you what you can and can't spend it on. But I think that the state has indicated that those checks should go out before the end of the year. So I would expect them sometime in December. And it looks like your dollar amount's about $135,000, give or take. So that's a good amount of money that you can spend on a one-time basis on anything, almost anything relative to public safety. But with that, Mr. Mayor, I'd certainly open it up to any questions, but appreciate the opportunity to just kind of stop by and give you a brief update.
No, thank you, Eric, and for all the hard work down there. Since we became a member of this coalition, I think it's been very beneficial, and of course, the increase in public aid or safety aid and LGA will help communities such as Proctor House, so thank you. Did council have any other questions or comments? Hearing none.
Thank you. Appreciate your time. Have a good night.
You too.
Thanks.
That will bring us to 4B, bond sale final official statement. Finance Director Brunfeld.
I will be very brief. We had a bond sale. Robert W. Baird was the company that was that won that bid, and they came in with a rate of 3.71, which we were very happy with. That was probably partially a result of our increase in our rating from Moody's from A1 to AA3. There was also additional proceeds in that sale that amounts to about $183,000. So all was good. Any questions?
Council have any questions? No? Thank you. That will bring us to 4C, Second Street Project Update. Administrator Rich.
Thank you, Mayor. You all did receive an email this week that we have started work on the school side of Second Avenue, and with that will be some blasting. That blasting is expected to start this week, and we'll try to keep the public as notified as we can on, and I believe the Proctor Journal is going to be printing some information on it as well through social media, emails to the residents. Otherwise, the project is running on time. And is going very well. The public is being very patient with the project, and the contractor has been kept communication open and is responsive to issues that arise throughout the week.
Council have any questions for Councilor Benson?
How's the residents been during the project so far?
They've been extremely patient. There's little fires that happen every once in a while, but it's not any, like I said, the contractor has been responsive. SEH has helped in a lot of that. Of course, our utilities, water, sewer, electric have been responsive, and we take every feedback we get and we just try to do better week by week.
Do you get yes, ma'am? Do you get a notice an hour or so, a day or so before the blasting is going to occur? Or?
Oh yeah, we'll get a notice at least a day before.
Okay.
Yeah, and the length. Of course, the duration and the length all depends on what they run into. But yeah, we've communicated that we need good notification.
Thank you.
Councilor Johnson.
I think they started today.
Oh, they did.
Yeah, because I heard the horn go off and then a big blast,
That would be it then.
and the neighborhood kids on their bikes were getting away from there. I could see them, so, yeah.
Thank you. Councilor Benson.
Maybe if, just to kind of keep us in the loop, if you could just let us know when those things might happen. So if we get a phone call saying what's going on for somebody just outside that project area, might be helpful.
Yep.
Thank you.
Any other comments? Hearing none, we'll move on to 4D, Sand Salt Garage Project Update. Administrator Rich.
We received very good news this week. The lumen fiber optic line was cut, which means it was relocated. It needed to be lowered in order for us to proceed with construction. The week before that, we held a pre-construction meeting with the contractor. They're getting a little bit later start than what they wanted to, but they still feel that they can complete the project before the end of fall.
Thank you. Any questions regarding that? Hearing none. Councilor Johnson.
I looked, they're gonna dig up Kirkus this week or next week or whatever. With the traffic being not on Second Street, it's going on Kirkus. Is this gonna be a quick thing that they're gonna do, or?
They're hoping a one-day shutdown, and
Okay.
they'll detour to Westgate.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other comments? Hearing none, we'll move on to 4E, Playground for Everybody Project Update. Administrator Rich.
Thank you for your approval to move forward with the additional work that SCH and the Parks and Street Crew recommended for the playground. Right now, we need DNR approval because that scope of work was not included in the original grant. So we do need to get them to approve the additional work, which requires a grant amendment, so I'm working with them right now. This is the second or third grant administrator I've been working with since I came on board, so there's been some turnover in the department, and our new grant administrator is working very hard to get that approval for us.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments on that project? Hearing none, brings us to 4F, Orange Places Project Update. Administrator Rich.
And finally, with our projects that are going on this summer, we did get our survey results from the Orange Places project. The results were very interesting, and I'll share those with you in an email. With the results of that survey, the committee met and came up with some short-term improvements that they can make to the park to make an impact immediately this season. And those recommendations were due to do some pavement rehab, and by rehab, we do not mean replacing it. We mean weed removal, cleaning, sealing cracks, and then painting lines for courts. Mayor, remind me, also adding bathrooms, adding some art and some signage,
Maybe tables or benches?
maybe tables and benches. Those are immediate things that we can show the community that we're taking action. And the good news of that is most of this will be funded through Essentia. So this first phase of the project is to get some impactful changes to get people to use the park more. But by and large, the community, the people who responded to the survey asked that it remain a basketball pavement type facility for kids to use.
Any comments regarding that project? Councilor Benson?
Thank you. In the discussion with the committee, going through the survey and the desire to just leave it as it is, was there any sort of forward reimagining of what that space could be, other than just leaving it?
Yeah, there was. There's, like I said, there's like short-term, mid-term, long-term goals, adding some green space, yes, keeping the concrete or the pavement or concrete or whatever we choose, but adding additional features to the park.
But what we're looking now is just that short-term, immediate improvements, and the rest will come eventually.
Correct.
Is there a timeline, or just happy to get something?
No timeline on it, that we've decided as a committee. I know the long-term plan or vision was, it'll be kind of a spendy park to start on. So that's why we're starting small, just making some improvements that will better that area of the block, but hopefully down the road we can see that long-term goal come to fruition.
So very excited to see that for someone who parked there in high school.
Any other comments regarding that? Hearing none, that'll bring us to 5A under unfinished business, City of Proctor blight policy. Councilor DeWall.
Yeah, last meeting I was requested a follow-up on some information on status, specifically the 6th and 5th. Actually, it'd be 6th and 1st. Where are we at? And that kind of goes in with the blight policy too. That's been under unfinished business for some time now.
I'm going to defer to,
Mr. Mayor?
Councilor
And I
Benson.
just wanted to add to what Councilor DeWall said, is that I've been hearing increased complaints. Drive by there every other day just to see what's going on, and with, blocking the sidewalks and some other things. And I think we all, in one form or fashion, hear some issues with that area.
Yeah, I drove by today just to kind of take a peek, and I know he had a small little excavator right on the sidewalk. He had a pickup truck parked on the sidewalk. I mean, so yeah, and the volume of complaints is getting louder, so. Chief?
So the officer was out there last month and talked to him. 3 vehicles were removed from the property, other things were removed, but now another vehicle has appeared. So some things did get removed, but now things are being added again.
Yeah, and I know that trailer with the brush on it's been sitting there for 2 months.
I would say so.
Do we have a policy where you can't leave unhooked trailers parked on the street? Or a policy that
Well,
defines you
we'd
can't?
have to look at, again, about the right-of-way, but that sidewalk is like, that's been an issue too in the past, we've talked about trying to redo that, and then they park in front of the sidewalk and stuff and on the sidewalk, which we do have ordinance, you can't park on the sidewalk. So I told the officer about the backhoe that was on there and talked to him about that. That has to get removed. I mean, but it's just like he goes out there and he goes, like I say, the 3 vehicles were removed, now we got another one that appeared. So we get somewhere and then we're right back to where we're at,
Right. And
if not worse.
is this something to address the City of Proctor blight policy that's been on here? Is this something we should put a small committee together to form? Chief Gadas, Attorney Bray would have to be involved with that, maybe a counselor or two, so we can come up with a blight policy to address these issues and have a quicker course of action to clean up some of these properties? Something we could look at? Would that be something of interest to council? I know it's another committee and another meeting, but it does have to be addressed. I mean,
We need to do something because it's just we're going in circles. Was it 2 years or a year ago with contamination? 2 years now?
At least.
I mean, I know it was perfectly cleaned up then after that day, and then 2 years we're back, but if we're gonna play this cat and mouse game with 2 disappear and 3 reappear, I mean, we need to come up with something that's a little, because obviously what we're doing isn't working.
And Counselor's like, he's not the only, that property is not the only property we have the same issue with.
Right.
We get them cleaned up, and then within a year, the whole place is right back to where it was. So how do we stop this activity that goes on all the time?
Well, that's why I think and this is just my simple head, but maybe we do need to look at a committee with some legal advice on how we can react quicker.
Mm-hmm. And I don't want things to be so strict that, somebody has something a little that our ordinance is so strict on things, but not to get to this point where we have other residences that are possibly bringing down the tax base of other houses.
Right, and most of the time, if there's a residence that has a few vehicles and you go talk to them, they'll clean it up.
Mm-hmm.
But it's these ones that just continually create more and more and more, and nothing ever gets done with it. I think that's, we can have an ordinance in place and a simple conversation. A lot of times will fix those problems, but with others, you could talk till you're blue in the face and nothing changes. And I think that's where our blight policy needs to really address those reoccurring or violations,
And these are the most frustrating for me in the years doing this, because when you do get it cleaned up, okay, it looks nice, the people are happy, but then here we are again, like the Councilor DeWall says, we're right back to where we were. But I think the sidewalk issue is something to look at too in that area.
Yeah, absolutely. So I don't know how would that be an item for next agenda to come up with a blight policy committee? Maybe,
I think it deserves the attention, Mr. Mayor, to have,
because we can't really make a decision on that now, can we?
no.
Put a committee together for that? I mean, we're addressing the blight policy.
I would think, because I had it pulled, that we could put together a committee for due diligence to report back to council.
Try and work on something here in the
But-
next.
So we put some time and energy into it so we can actually get something accomplished.
Right. I'd be all right with that, council. So I guess we'll entertain well, first, let's have a discussion on, thanks, chief. Let's have a discussion on who we'd like to see on that committee. In my opinion, obviously, the chief of police, our attorney, and I would like to see a couple counselors on there too. Administrator Rich, probably, right? Anyone else we think we need on the committee?
Would,
Street guys?
I'm just wondering if some representation from street, being they remove the snow, they know the problem areas. I guess I'd defer to our city attorney, what,
Planning and zoning,
maybe planning and zoning would be
one
better.
person from there.
Yeah, that'd be a good idea.
And actually, one person could cover both hats
Yeah,
on that, if we had,
one of our street guys is on planning and zoning, so.
yeah.
Chief, yeah.
I think it would be good to have one of the street crew members on there because they sometimes help us with these types of properties. So I'd like to know what their abilities are, what equipment, and we can say, you can do this, you can't do this. But as in other communities, you see that the public works to help clean up these type of issues. So I think it'd be a good idea to have one of them on there.
I like that. So either
So it's 6.
Mr. Boysen, because he would fill both seats there, but if Jay don't want to be a part of it, then we would need one street guy and one P and Z guy. Sorry.
I would heavily recommend Jay.
Right, so we got 2 council, chief, attorney, admin, P and Z, and street. So 6 or 7 people would be on the committee. Does that work for council? I'll make a motion then to create a Proctor Blight Policy Committee consisting of 2 city councilors, the chief of police, city administrator, city attorney, and either one from P and Z and one from street, or those could be combined if possible. Is there a second to my motion?
I'll second.
Councilor DeWall seconded it. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Oppose? Motion passes. Would we like to set our counselors that would be interested in sitting on that committee tonight? I have no problem sitting on it if you'd like me to, but if others have interest,
I would be willing to sit on it unless others wanna.
would you guys have interest in sitting on that? No?
I would act as a council alternate,
Okay.
but I'm gonna be busy the next 6 weeks. So.
Okay. All right, so I'll make a motion then to seat Mayor Ward and Councilor DeWall to the policy committee, or Blight Policy Committee, if there's a second.
Second?
Seconded by Councilor Benson. Any further discussion on that? Hearing none. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Oppose? Motion passes. Any further business under 5A? Hearing none. We'll move on to 6A, new business, 2022 financial statement. We have Michelle from Whitfley here and Finance Director Brunfeld.
Great. I assume you all have a copy of the financial statement. I'll do a pretty brief overview, but just let me know if you have questions, or let Leslie know if you have questions, and you can get back to me at any time. I'm going to just quick talk about the auditor's report, because that, of course, is why we're doing the audit. For us, it's the most important part, page 2. And on page 2, we give an opinion. We gave a qualified opinion on the governmental activities, an unmodified opinion on the business type activities, each major fund, and the aggregate remaining fund information. The qualified opinion essentially just comes from the fact that the Proctor Fire Relief is not included in these financial statements. No other reason except for that. So just so you're aware of that. So I will actually.
Would you say that one more time?
Yeah, the reason we have a qualified opinion on the government fund financials is because we're not, or the government activities, is because we're not including the fire relief in the financials. That's the only reason for the qualified opinion. The rest are unmodified, clean opinion. So I'll go straight to the actual fund financial statements, starting on page 15. So 15 is the governmental funds balance sheet. And I just want to look at the general fund column, the very first column. If you go all the way down to the bottom, your fund balances, this is broken out between your non-spendable, restricted, committed, assigned, and unassigned. The biggest portion is going to be your restricted, which is shown in the footnotes what the restrictions are for. But I did want to point out your unassigned of $1,489,000 is 36% of your total fund balance. And that, I believe, is a little bit of a decrease or increase over last year. I want to flip over to page 17. So the revenue, expenses, and changes in fund balance for the governmental funds. And taking a look again at the first column, which is your general fund. First section is your total revenue. So if you look at your total revenue in that fund of $4,086,000, that is an increase over 2021 of $184,000. So you did have an increase there. If you come down to your total expenditures, right in the middle of the page in the general fund, $3,224,000. That was actually a decrease in expenditures of $418,000, but you did have a lot less capital outlay in your general fund in 2022. So then if we come all the way to the bottom, the third line up from the bottom, your net change in fund balance. In the general fund, you had a $137,000 increase in your fund balance overall. But if you look right above there, actually go up just a little ways where it says excess deficiency of revenue over expenditures. If you see that line of 862,536, that is going to be your excess. But what you did have, if you look in the next section, is a transfer out of the general fund of $755,000. So that brought your change in that fund down to $137,000. And most of that went into your missed construction project fund, which I believe is the salt and storage shed project. So that's where most of that money got transferred. There's a few other funds here, just going across. $5,000 income in your 2016A fund, $14,000 in your 2018A fund. Your capital missed construction project fund, which is that one project, a loss of $404,000. There's some funding that hasn't come in yet, so you had some expenditures, you haven't gotten the funding yet on that. Your non-major funds, which are all listed in the back, a loss of $169,000 for a total loss for the year of $119,000. And some of that is just timing of when your expenditures and your revenue hit. Then I'll go over to page 19 and take a quick look at your budget. And this is for the general fund. You will notice your budget to actual revenues. Your revenues were over budget, $378,000. Taxes was a portion of that I believe was sales, a little bit more in sales tax. And then your intergovernmental, there was some revenue in there, grants and things that were not in the budget. Down in the middle of the page, your total expenditures, budget to actual, were actually under budget, $34,850. So that brings you, if you look at the variance column, excess of revenue over expenditures. Actually, if you look at the budget column, you were expecting $449,000. You came in at $862,000 of revenue over expenditures. So for a positive increase over your budget of $413,000. And then you did have your other financing uses. Your transfers out came in more than what you had budgeted, which brings you down to, again, your change in fund balance of $137,000 in that fund, and you were expecting $377,000 for a decrease of $240,000, which really comes from those transfers. Your proprietary funds, I will skip over to those on page 22. So your public utilities, your liquor store, your sewer fund, and your golf course. I'll just go right down to the very middle of the page where it says operating income loss. You did have operating income in your public utilities fund of $290,000. Your liquor store came in at operating income of $26,000. The sewer fund did have a loss of $43,000, and your golf course did have a loss of $108,000. For total operating income in your propriety funds of $164,000. And then you did have some investment income, and then a little bit of transfers. So if you go down to your change in net position line, you can see what happened there. Your golf course does have, if you look at this, your golf course fund does have some non-operating revenue of $68,000. So that brought the total change in net position down to a loss of $20,000. Public utilities did have some investment income, so it's $363,000 of income. Liquor store, $22,000, and a loss in the sewer fund of $35,000, for a total loss for the year, or income for the year in your proprietary funds of $329,000. I just want to point out a couple other things as part of our audit, and flipping all the way back to page 72. So we do look at your internal controls as part of our audit, and part of that is looking at internal controls over your financial reporting, and then over compliance and determining are there any deficiencies. We do have one deficiency that we reported that is a very common deficiency in smaller cities that we report every year. And I will talk about that in 1 second. That was the only thing I had to note. Otherwise, we had no non-compliance that we had to report. But on page 74, I just want to talk about this one quickly first. We issue another report on the testing of compliance we did over legal compliance with the state of Minnesota. There are 7 categories that we look at for compliance with legal compliance audit guides for the city. We did not have any non-compliance that to report under that. So that's good. So then on page 75 is where we actually report our finding. It's a financial statement finding, and it's basically because we prepare the financials, including disclosures for you, which is really that's a management responsibility. And then we are also it's mostly because, we're the ones with the expertise in all of the required disclosures, et cetera. So that is very common. It's in here. It's not a finding that I think the city needs to worry a lot about. And Leslie does do a very nice job with the actual accounting. So we don't have a ton of adjustments, and things that we do adjust are things Leslie and I have already pretty much talked through. So I know I went over that very quickly. Is there any questions?
Council have any questions? Councilor Benson?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Was the majority of the audit done in-house here, or was it done over, electronically, or?
It's about, I want to say 40, 60. We're here for almost a week. But our preliminary, which is quite a bit of time, and then our final wrap-up and prep, financial statement prep, which is a big project, is not on site. So it's about that, I would say. But we do spend some time. We do spend a lot of time on site testing.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Hearing none. Thank you, Michelle. Thank you,
Okay.
Leslie.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. With that, we'll entertain a motion to accept the 2022 where am I here? Yeah, the 2022 financial statement presented by Whitley. Wow.
So moved.
Councilor Johnson made the motion. Is there a second? Second by Councilor Benson. Any other discussion? Hearing none. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Oppose? Motion passes. That'll bring us to That'll bring us to 6B, Resolution 30-234M Fund Fixed Rate Program. Finance Director Brunfeld.
All right, so the memo that I presented really kind of tells the story about how in this uncertain environment with interest rates going up and presumably eventually going down again, we want to just diversify that timeline, the amount of time that we are investing. 4M has an additional investment tool that we are not currently using. The main difference is that this would be us purchasing individual investments rather than being part of a pooled fund. So they would help advise us on perhaps a CD to purchase that would be a 24-month, something a little bit longer term, so that we could lock in some of the higher rates that we're seeing right now.
Okay. Council have questions regarding resolution 30-23? Hearing none, we'll entertain a motion to accept resolution number 30-23, reauthorizing membership in the 4M fund. I'll make that motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilor Johnson. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Oppose? Motion passes. Thanks for the memo, Leslie. That really broke things down too nicely. Brings us to 6C, records management, Laserfish quote. Administrator Rich.
Thank you, Mayor. I would say since pretty much the day I started here with Proctor, records management has been a discussion in the office. Everything from making sure we're on the proper retention schedules, we're purging records when we can, we're digitalizing when we can. And then throughout the years, there's been an extended push to organize our records in a way to make them accessible to the public, such as being able to access your particular parcel, your homeowner's parcel of permit records, and having all of those available online. So we've been researching it probably for the last year and a half, and this is a recommendation that's coming from Assistant Megan, who does most of the records retention. Leslie has been working, Finance Director Brunville has been working on this, and entering this program will streamline our records retention and eventually make it accessible to the public. There's just some records that we have to permanently keep, and these can be digitalized and permanently kept in this way according to the records retention schedule. There's certain features in this program that if you have to keep a document for 1 year, after 1 year it automatically gets purged, and that's recorded properly for our purposes. So with that, we are recommending to enter a contract for Laserfish data records retention and management, and that recommendation's in your packet.
So council heard the recommendation. It looks like it's to accept the proposal from CDI in the amount of $22,212 for the implementation and addition of Laserfish. Is there a motion to approve?
I'll make that motion.
Councilor Johnson made the motion. Is there a second? No second? Hearing no second, motion fails. Council want to have discussion?
I'll second.
Councilor Benson seconds that. I said Councilor Benson seconds the motion.
Yes.
That Councilor Johnson made. Any discussion?
I have a couple questions.
Councilor DeWall.
It's a fairly decent investment. What would be the pros of using this? Is this less staff time then needed to take care of this? I know at one point, I'm going to say 2017 or 18 or 19, somewhere in there, prior to COVID, it was a mess back there. I guess I thought it was an intent that we had a bunch of cleaning up to do from previous years. Nobody really did anything except stockpile boxes in the back. Figuring that a good use of time during COVID with having the ability to spend some time on it, that would get through that egg a little bit, and then it would be easier to maintain. My fear is, what happens if this company doesn't work, or we have to change, or And then there's $3,100, I thought it was $3,100 annually. Is this similar to, like our ordinance book, where every time there's a change or something, we then, one of our employees passes it on to another company who then puts it in a system? Is this taking over the, I guess I'll call it the famous M drive that we had as a city, where we would put, I know we were trying to organize that a bit. So I guess those are just some of the questions off the tip of my tongue right now.
I can take a stab at some of it if you wanted to. Yes, it is an intent to take over the M drive, and the M drive is stored, is like our local database right here on site. And this program would be cloud-based, it'd be accessible off location. Some of the benefits of using it is we're able to take our current records and our future records and be able to make them available to the public. So there's a transparency part of it too. There's customer service benefit to it. There is, yes, if you're able to open up your parcel file online and look at your past permits, you now don't have to make that phone call and have somebody go to the file and pull those past permits and email them to you and get them to you. So eventually down the road, yes, it could lead to less staff time. If you had anything else to add, Leslie?
Yeah, just a couple things. One, just in regards to the company with the annual fee, that's Laserfiche. It's a well-established document management system. The League of Minnesota Cities has made a deal with them to allow us to get this at this price. It's kind of an amazing deal. If we were the city of Duluth, we would pay probably $100,000 a year for the same system. So they just give us the same system and base the price on the size of our city. So that is really an excellent thing. The other component is the company that are consulting with us to help us set that up. Once we get it set up, we will not need their services any longer.
So if I could interrupt, Laserfiche is like, if I could explain it, it's like Office 365. It's the program. And then our CDI is the company, like Leslie said, that's going to help us management.
Yeah.
Should they fall aside or whatever, you can have another consultant come in. We've got the package. We've got the software, as you might want to call it.
Right.
So the cost for the package, or what you're calling 365, is the $3,100 a year.
Mm-hmm.
The upfront 22 and some change, or whatever it is to basically take our old existing records, and put them into the system to give us a jump start?
Some of it is set up. So every document type will have a setup that it goes into the system. It won't just be, a scan, here's all the minutes. Each set of minutes will have certain tags attached to it, and so there'll be a setup for how we're going to do that. And then we have chosen a couple of document types that they will take and scan off-site for us and get them in the system. I believe that's the minutes and the council packets.
Yeah.
So there could be additional costs down the road if we choose to have another document type scanned in by someone else, or we can, in the process of doing these first couple setups, we'll be trained in how to do that setup ourselves. It also is a system that works in conjunction with our accounting system, the Cassell Civic Systems that we purchased a couple years ago. So all of our accounts payable, all of that will be in Laserfiche as well, and that will be a seamless process to have that moved into that system. It'll just happen automatically.
So one just quick question, as far as the parcel files. If citizen A comes in and says, I want to review I bought this house, it's on this address, 123 B Street. Is that
under the $20, do we charge $20 for a fee for that, copying of that, or is that free?
They could view it on site. First of all, what would happen with the request for that is we would accept the request, it has to be a data request. Then we would go through the file to make sure there isn't any private data in it, such as maybe at some point a neighbor complained about their dog. That's not public data for them. So we would pull anything private out, and then they could, one, review it on site, right at the front desk. If they wanted copies, they would get charged for photocopies.
So this system then will be set up to determine in that parcel file what is public and what is private.
It has capabilities of redacting, so we can choose either not to put things in that are not available to public, or we can have certain files that can be viewed and others that can't, or we can redact individual documents.
So in essence, we'll have to have two different files. We could potentially have to have two different, we'd have to use the new system for public information and.
No,
the
no,
old-
no. The new system can identify what's public and what's not.
So then it would be, employees might have access to it, those that are authorized.
And yeah, there's a whole, I mean, there's authorization within departments as well of who has access to what data.
And this would clean up that back room with all the boxes of
It will
files.
start to.
Start to.
It's going to be a long process. I
right.
don't want to give you any misconceptions that we're going to snap our fingers and all the boxes are going to be gone.
Right, but it'll start that process.
Yeah.
And what would happen now, say we had a fire in here and all those boxes burnt up? What's the legal ramifications on something like that?
Well, we wouldn't be able to respond to requests for documents, but I don't know what else there would be legal
So, but this new
ramifications.
system would eliminate that
Yeah. this-
nightmare.
Liability.
Yeah.
One other real advantage to the system that we haven't mentioned yet is the ability to search is phenomenal compared to our current abilities, especially when you talk about the paper files. You can literally search for any word in any type of document, and it can come up.
You don't have to go through a banker's box?
Right.
What's the fun in that?
I know. We might not get as many paper cuts.
So Administrator Rich and I were talking earlier today about this whole thing. And this is something that would have to be budgeted for yearly, right? Because there is gonna be a yearly cost to it besides the 3,100 or just the 3,100?
The 31 is our commitment.
Okay.
We can choose, like, this year, our finance director Brunfeld put it in the budget, as you have in the memo, to get us started. We would expect that there to be an annual allotment to get another project started, say next time we move on to minutes, committee meeting minutes, because there's boxes and years of those, and then it's PUC meeting minutes, something, so you would chip away at it over the years.
Okay.
Speaking of PUC, when the projects that you've destined to put into this fiche system, are some of those PUC too?
Not this first initial year, no.
So part of that expense, when PUC participates, would come from PUC, their share.
It could.
Okay.
It could. I would imagine maybe one year we choose PUC as the year, and they pay the base fee, the maintenance fee, and then their project to get Laserfiche is a possibility.
So what does if we're looking at, I guess I'm trying to understand this here, 23,000, 22,000, whatever it is, that is the project fee to put into this new system what we want to put in there, other than like agendas and minutes, correct? That's the cost?
It's consulting.
Right, but you see where I'm going with this?
Consulting and training for us, because we've not worked with this.
Right, so when PUC decides next year, hey, this is a good idea, can we get in for $3,100, or is it gonna be $3,100 plus 22,000?
The biggest chunk of it is the scanning. Taking the documents off-site. I think that's 15,000
Yep,
of the
the
quote.
scanning services of city council packets and minutes, which is actually physical scanning, is $15,312. That's what we prioritize as the first year project.
So there would be a cost that may be that or something different, depending on how many boxes and how many files and how detailed they're tagged when they're put in. So we would evaluate that on a year-by-year basis.
However, we will be trained that we may be able to do some of that work too.
And yeah, we may find that we could hire a summer intern to scan a certain level of boxes. I mean, we're not really sure on that next step.
Until we learn more about the system. I guess we had envisioned it that we would prioritize each year what the project was going to be once we learn the system, determine how much we can do in-house, and then how much we have to outsource. Like, for example, the minutes that are bound in the books. It would be wonderful to get those scanned so that people could access those, but now that requires a service to take that bonding apart. As you know, Counselor Benson, you don't just, you got to take the book apart, scan all of those old documents in. That may be a priority year. PUC 1 year. Eventually, police department 1 year.
Is this something the police could use with their security features?
It's kind of ironic because we're going to be forced to switch to a different record system pretty soon with the new sheriff. And this, I haven't talked to City Administrator Jess about it too much, but it could be.
Okay.
You know, but most of our records will be, like police reports will be separate from Laserfish. It'll be all on the new record system or the current record system that we have. So I'd have to sit down with her a little bit more.
I'm thinking like pet licenses or, those things.
Yeah,
that aren't-
simple thing.
yeah.
It shouldn't be too much, but I mean, yes, we could probably still do it, but there's other things like maybe it would help me where I can actually look at things now instead of going over to City Hall and saying, Mr. Dewall's in the office, can you look on an M drive for me for this so I can research something? Because I didn't have access to that,
Okay.
so.
Okay. Any other discussion? Counselor Benson?
Over not the first or second year, but is there an estimated savings overall, 5 years down the road?
I don't know that we could speak to that.
I don't think there's going to be a savings. I don't think it's fair to say that, hey, we're not going to have overtime or we're not going to have this or that. I think what it does is it sets us up for a more efficient future of having transparent system for, instead of Megan spending a half a day trying to find something on a council agenda that was in 2017, or having to go back. I know there was times, I don't know how many years I had to go back, but I had to dig through 5 boxes until I found something, whether it was for an audit or, I can't remember. There was various things I'd have to go back there and dig, and I think that's when it started. Pre-COVID is Megan and I kind of got together and said, hey, this is ridiculous. So I think it's just an investment to do a better service to our citizens and to help with our potential liability of either A, not finding the document or losing it, or heaven forbid a fire were to happen. I'm sure there could be potential lawsuits if we're supposed to have something and we can't provide it. But it's like I don't think it's like the system we purchased 2 years ago, or,
The accounting system?
I mean, that you could see savings after things got loaded in. It helped with payroll maybe, and helped with just ease of providing some statements. I don't know if you can really say you're saving money with this. It's an investment.
I would echo that. I would echo transparency. I would echo it's our duty to maintain these records and keep them safe. That's number one job description of a city clerk is record keeping, keeping them safe from fire. Where are your sprinkler heads? If you were to have a fire, is it in the records room? Well, there goes the records. So it's, like Councilor Duvall said, it's a step in that direction of doing our job, and that is maintaining public records.
Any other questions? Councilor Johnson?
Do we know of other cities that use this, or is there lots of cities that use this and they love it and all that kind of stuff? We've done research into that. Okay.
The city of Hermantown is hiring a deputy city clerk, I believe, and that was one of the main job descriptions, was to get the city of Hermantown up into Laserfish. So it's large cities. In fact, because it was an initiative of the League of Minnesota Cities, they're strongly encouraging cities to move in this direction.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other discussion? Hearing none, we have a motion and second on the floor. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Oppose? Motion passes. Brings us to 6D, Resolution 31-23 designating surplus equipment. In your packet is a network security gateway backup internet equipment from the liquor store, purchased in 2019 for $800. Current value is $250. The equipment is no longer needed, so they're looking to put this into surplus. Is there a motion to do so?
So move.
Let me rephrase that. Is there a motion to approve Resolution 31-23?
So move.
Councilor Johnson made the motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilor Benson. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Oppose? Motion passes. 6E, Performance Measurement Program Survey. Councilor Benson.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. We discussed this a little bit last year and probably the year before that. And it's passed, so we're into a new year. The last time Proctor did something like this, resident survey, was about 10 years ago. And nothing much has changed. Some cities use it all the time. Other cities don't. Probably a majority of the cities don't bother with it. Other cities, big and small, like it. I've added a couple of extra questions. Usually there's 10 or 12 that you have to ask. Forgot to count to see how many I have. But it was suggested that I bring it up again and put it on the agenda for discussion or maybe action. And here it is.
Thank you, Councilor.
And I think usually we try to get it done in April for presentation sometime in June. So we have plenty of lead time for 2024.
Thank you, Councilor. Is there a motion to approve the Performance Measurement Program Survey?
I'll move the motion.
Councilor DeWall made the motion. Is there a second? I'll second that. Any further discussion? I guess, how would we like to proceed with the questions? I think I counted 16 maybe on here that you have right now.
I would say, at least since we do have a little bit of a lead time, we could look at where do you live, maybe do that a little bit differently. I just kind of randomly selected some stuff. There may be some questions you would like to add. Others you might want to delete.
Council just want to counsel in, I guess, city staff want to take a look and maybe come back with some ideas on questions. Councilor Benson, you looking at putting this out? I think you said somewhere in here that it was done April timeframe last time.
Yeah,
You looking at doing kind of the same time frame? April of next year? You want to see this get out sooner?
Yeah, I think, you know, if we do it, probably towards the end of the year, or at least that gives us some time so we don't have to rush to, put out a survey that's not gonna give us accurate information. I think this would be important for us, hopefully.
Council, all right then, taking a look, maybe coming up with a couple questions to put on this and go from there?
I think it'd be easily accomplished through maybe a Survey Monkey, but I'm not real sure about that. I haven't used one before. I mean, I haven't created one,
Right.
been on enough of them.
I would think that if it's for our citizens, we could use the back of the puck bill or something to get out, go to this site, and, you know, they could fill that all out through, I've only been a part of it once, but I don't think it was that big of a deal through the Survey Monkey.
Well, in that orange, what is it, Orange Places at Third Street Park, they just did a survey too. Maybe we can ask Russell how he did that. I took the survey, but I don't know how he set it up. But there were good results. And what did he say, Administrator Rich? Surveys were 10 or 15% was the return rate on surveys typically, so.
And usually even with coupons and paper, if you get a 3-4% return, that's pretty good. And I forgot to at least commit to memory. I want to say maybe the last time we did this, we had possibly a couple of hundred, 187 sticks of paper. And I certainly want to be sensitive to having another task on city staff.
Well, I think if we all do little, right, no one has to do a lot. So if we all can come up with a couple questions each and put them together, and then it's not falling on city staff's time either, so. But if city staff has input, that would be greatly appreciated too, if you got some you'd like to see put on there. Cool. Any other discussion? Hearing none. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Oppose? Motion passes. Brings us to 6F, bike surplus. In our email earlier today, there was a memo from the Proctor Police Department. They have looks like a list of 10 found bicycles that have been held for over 90 days. They're unclaimed, and they want to put these into surplus equipment as well. So there would be resolution number 32-23, and it lists the 10 bikes and putting them into a surplus. So is there a motion to accept resolution 32-23? I'll make that motion for discussion. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilor Johnson. Any discussion? Chief, what are we doing with these bikes?
They'll go on, when we put the cars up for auction on mid-bid, they'll be on mid-bid also as a group or whatever. So we'll go to auction.
Is there something creative we could, I mean, do we get a lot of money for 10 bikes? I mean,
There might be like 2 or 3 that might be worth something. The other ones, like I say, since 1996, when I've been working here, you find them in the creek. You
Well, I was
find them
just-
destroyed. I mean, some are good, some are bad, but sometimes there is a gentleman down in Duluth that he would want them to make a couple good bikes and stuff like that. you
I was
know.
just wondering if there was, and I don't know if that's legal or not, but if there was something we could do with them, hand them out to kids in the community or.
Well, I know there was talks a while ago, maybe when I first got on council, but then it became a liability of, you know, we didn't purchase it new. If somebody got hurt, then are we responsible? Can we sell it as is? Because I know the racetrack does, kids can win a bike. I don't know which night it is. Maybe they already had it. But I also don't want to send them to auction and have it cost us money to get rid of them either.
city administrator Rich can talk about min-bid and how that works and stuff like that, but that's basically the state website for, the airport commissions, gets rid of a bunch of boxes of knives that they collect and stuff like that, at the terminal. Fergus Falls PD will sell their squads on there, you know, so that's what the state uses and the cities use to sell their surplus equipment on.
So is there a fee to,
It's a percentage of the sale.
right,
So
so
there's no upfront fee. If it doesn't sell, we get it back.
they come and pick them up, we don't have to deliver them?
Nope, they stay here, and then people bid on them, you put pictures on, they stay here, and then the people who win the bid know that they have to come pick them up here. We don't have to ship them out.
Kind of like what this did with the
Sorry.
golf course, with the golf carts. We're on min-bid. And to your point about the bikes, is this like, that's why, like for National Night Out, we would get bikes, brand new bikes donated to us and do that, and they're brand new.
If it's something that's in terrible condition, I would imagine we just give it to someone who scraps, right, or has a scrap person.
Well, I have a couple names of people that,
Yeah.
you know, they just take them and they'll take the parts off it to make a good bike, and then they donate it to the needy kids in the area.
Right, that adds a
Yeah.
different layer, so it's not,
Yes.
it's coming from them,
Yeah.
not from us.
Correct.
Okay. Which-
Either or, I mean, it could, like as long as it, but that's the first path, but it's just like if that gentleman's not available anymore, you know, then we'll auction them off. I'd rather have them stay here and somebody fixes them up to make, you know, be nice. I don't expect to make too much money off of old bikes. Just wanna clear up our garage a little bit too.
I just don't wanna have it be where some of these outfits charge a minimum fee, so you get $1 for the bike, but they charge you $10 to put it online to sell it, you know?
Mhm.
That's what I'm trying to avoid.
Well, and our time, like, what Ms. Rich is saying is like, they're here, we don't have to move them, like the squad cars, we don't have to move them, the people have, if they wanna sit there and see them, they can come here and inspect the cars. We don't have to bring them up to an auction site. And, you know, wait and have our time doing it.
Well, and it sounds like this does not have a minimum fee. It's, if it
Yeah.
collects $1 and they charge 10%, we get 90, they get 10. If it gets 0, it doesn't cost us anything, because we're stuck with it. So, that was my only question.
Yeah, as is, whereas with any old fault, so here you go, there's a bike.
Thank you, Chief. Counselor Benson?
I did want to make note that my first bicycle came from a Proctor Police Department bicycle auction at the old village hall.
Any other discussion on that? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Brings us to 7A, looking for a motion to go into closed session for attorney-client privilege per Minnesota State Statute 13D05 subdivision 3. What's that? Pending litigation as well.
So moved.
Counselor DeWall made the motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Counselor Johnson. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion passes. Is she gonna?
wanted to, I got a couple of things. One is 35 years ago this week, Proctor's Memorial Jet got operational lights for, to the tune of back then, 1988, 35 years ago, $13,400. But it was the only static display in the country that had operational lights. So, yeah, if we could work that in for this latest retrofit. Then the other thing that's kind of notice under the legislative discussion, the city of Hermantown is submitting a grant funding request in association with the Munger Trails Fair, the Proctor Hermantown Munger Trails Fair. The city received, Hermantown received $840,000 in 2017 for a portion of the trail, and now they're requesting a second grant of $1 million to do another segment that will bring us up to Levake and Uggstead. 2.8 miles, they estimate at 3.3 million. And those funds are going to be available through their recent referendum, their community recreation initiative. So they're moving ahead with their portion of the Munger Trail space.
Thank you, Counselor. Counselor DeWall.
Actually, I have two things.
Ooh.
One of them, I know both of them are probably on your list, but I'm gonna be overachiever tonight.
Good job.
I did notice that the welcome sign was up, and Councilor Reuter is not here, but it was nice to see that up again. And then, the reminder about our public safety.
Well,
We only had two teams signed up over the weekend, so we're gonna postpone it, or postpone it for the fall.
to be continued. Counselor Johnson.
Just a reminder, the community picnic next week, Thursday, at St. Rose.
That is July 27th at 4:30, right?
It's just an FYI, the day after my birthday, so if you guys wanna, give me a birthday present.
Okay, well, let me put some thought into that.
Be careful what you wish for.
I just have a couple things now that two of them have been mentioned, but Proctor is having Proctor Night at the Wade on July 21st. I think you've seen that on social media and in the Proctor Journal, so that will be happening. And we have a county commissioner meeting being held here at Proctor at 8:30 in the morning on July 25th. And that is all I have, so Administrator Rich.
I have nothing. Are you off the hook?
First time, I think, ever. So, Administrator Rich?
I have nothing.
Nothing, thank you. We'll entertain a motion to pay the bills in the amount of $116,564.72. I'll make that motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Sent by Counselor Johnson. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Oppose? Motion passes. Looking for a motion to adjourn. Counselor DeWall made a motion to adjourn. Is there a second? I'll second that. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Oppose? Motion passes. Thank you.